Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you all. According to British media, there is now a field where China is the only player. In addition, the United States has been aggressively increasing tariffs on Africa, causing widespread outrage. The New York Times laments that China is indeed Africa's only option right now. US President Trump has imposed heavy tariffs on the whole world, making him unpopular globally. Among all regions, the place where America's credibility has suffered the most is Africa. On September 9th, the New York Times reported again that while China's trade with the US has dropped sharply, some African exports have continued to surge. As Trump's tariff policies have blocked Chinese goods from entering the US, Chinese companies have significantly shifted their trade toward Africa. According to data released by the Chinese government on September 9th, by August this year, China had purchased goods and services from Africa worth $141 billion while importing $81 billion at the same time. So far this year, China's trade surplus with Africa has already reached $60 billion. This figure has almost surpassed the total for the entire previous year. The expansion of China's trade surplus with Africa is mainly due to China exporting manufactured goods such as automobiles, batteries, solar panels, electric vehicles, and industrial equipment. Exports to Africa have surged. In addition, China's exports to South Asia and Latin America have both hit record highs, highlighting how Chinese manufacturers have shown great resilience in finding new markets for the products their factories continue to produce in large quantities. China has long been Africa's largest trading partner, but as the trade war with the United States has intensified, China's exports to the US fell by 33% in August this year, while exports to Africa grew by 26% in the same month. It is important to note that what China brings to Africa is mainly not consumer goods, but rather new energy products and production equipment. If African countries can make good use of the goods brought by China, they can accelerate their development. For example, in terms of electrification, African countries generally suffer from power shortages. However, they lack the resources to invest in large-scale power plants. In this context, Chinese solar products have become a practical solution, at least in the capital of Rwanda. On the streets, the booming trend of China-Africa trade is obvious to see. In Kampala, in a bustling neighborhood lined with electronics shops, nearly every store is packed with solar panels waiting to be sold. They all have one thing in common: every single one is made in China. The owner of one of the shops, Joseph, told the New York Times reporter that over the past 10 years, Chinese solar panels have gradually squeezed out competing products from Europe and India. He estimates that nearly 99% of the solar products on the Rwanda market are made in China. Ultimately, Chinese products are unbeatable in terms of price. Joseph, the 38-year-old shop owner, said, "We do business to compete with others in the market. We can only look for cheap solar products to sell. This is the best product the Chinese have to offer us," said Joseph Xu. In this small and cramped electronics store, they don't just sell solar panels. From light bulbs to generators, almost everything is made in China. I've said before that China has made solar energy as cheap as cabbage. In the past 10 years, the price of solar panels in China has dropped by more than 90%. Now, generating electricity with solar power in China is actually cheaper than using coal, 35%, and for African countries, whether it's about development, whether it's large-scale solar power plants, or households using small solar panels to generate electricity, both can solve their electricity shortage problems. The New York Times also mentioned that the United States is significantly increasing tariffs on Africa. However, China continues to strengthen its cooperation with Africa through the Belt and Road Initiative. The contrast is quite stark, as some have said in the past. For more than a decade, as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, China has invested across the entire African continent. It has poured huge sums into building infrastructure. These projects not only help Africa develop, but also deepen the influence of both China and Africa. They have created business opportunities for Chinese companies and enabled them to obtain valuable raw materials. In contrast, this year, the Trump administration in the United States has cut aid to Africa, causing many health and development programs to come to a standstill. The US has also significantly increased tariffs on many African countries. Among them, it imposed a 30% tariff on goods from South Africa, a major African nation. Take Lesotho, a small country in southern Africa with a population of only 230, as an example. Initially, Trump threatened to impose a 50% tariff on Lesotho's goods, forcing this textile-dependent nation to declare a national state of disaster. Later, the US said the tariff rate could be reduced to 15%, but even so, it would still cause significant harm to Lesotho. According to the African Growth and Opportunity Act passed by the US Congress in 2000, nearly 20 African countries at the time could export certain products to the US and enjoy zero tariff treatment. Lesotho was among them, but now all of that is in the past. Said the New York Times, as the US has not withdrawn from Africa, China is emerging as a balancing economic force. Recently, in June, Beijing announced it would exempt all tariffs for 53 impoverished African countries. China is sending a message here. A mutually beneficial relationship rich in wisdom and fruitful for Africa's development. According to an editorial published by China's Xinhua news agency in January. In the past 3 years, China and Africa have created over 1 million jobs. For the past 25 years, China has also continuously helped Africa build roads, railways, bridges, and ports. Liu said that the cooperation between China and Africa is most evident in the solar energy sector. Although China holds a dominant position in all aspects of the solar industry, fierce competition and overcapacity have driven prices down. However, the sharp drop in solar prices has sparked a solar boom in Africa. The local demand for energy is extremely urgent, so they are turning to solar power. According to the tracking organization AMBA, solar energy is taking off in Africa. This organization says, in the past 12 months, Africa's imports of Chinese solar panels have increased by 60%. During this period, 20 African countries reached record highs in imports. In Uganda, many Chinese solar manufacturers have set up distribution offices in the capital, Kampala. This allows solar panel retailers to quickly obtain products. It has replaced the cumbersome process of importing products from China. The managing director couple of the business and solar installation company W Water said, Chinese solar companies are very common in Uganda. They are setting up branches all over the African continent, organizations. He said that more than 8 Chinese companies have distribution centers in Kampala. The business competition among these companies has driven prices down. He estimates that the price of solar panels has dropped by 40% in the past 12 months. The couple said that European competitors did not invest in Africa's solar industry like Chinese companies did, and by the time they realized it, it was already too late. By then, Chinese companies had already taken a dominant position in the industry. The New York Times says it's not just about clean energy. China's surge in exports to Africa to meet the continent's industrial demand is astonishing. In the first 5 months of this year, China's steel shipments to Africa increased by 30%, along with Chinese agricultural, construction, and shipbuilding machinery. Deliveries to Africa have all increased by more than 40%. In addition, according to China's latest customs data, exports of Chinese motors and generators to Africa have grown by over 50%. Although the US is boasting that the flood of Chinese exports into Africa could undermine African countries' efforts to develop their own high-value products. But the New York Times could only conclude in this way. It quoted Omojo Molo, an economist at Haimeng Investment Africa, as saying, African policymakers believe they must maintain good relations with China because China is indeed the only option. According to IMF forecasts in 2025, Africa's economy will become one of the fastest growing regions in the world. The global economy is expected to grow at 3.2%, while in sub-Saharan Africa, economic growth will reach 4.2%, surpassing the global average. To sum up, the United States is abandoning Africa and China is seizing the opportunity to step in. In addition, the US is not only failing in Africa, but it has also completely lost its voice in the field of green energy. But this is a field that will dominate the future. On September 7th, The Guardian published an article stating this. Historically, countries that have dominated energy have usually dominated politics and the economy as well. Now, in the field of green energy, China is the only player. China is the global leader in green energy. Wind turbines manufactured in Chinese factories are shipped all over the world. Photovoltaic panels and electric vehicles show that China has already won this 21st century energy battle. The Guardian. China has taken lead in crossing key threshold of 21st century energy transition. Scale of wind and solar energy under construction in China surpasses rest of world, twice regions. China's installed capacity of new energy has surpassed 1.2 billion kilowatts, achieving target 6 years ahead of schedule. Originally, the goal was for the total installed capacity of wind and solar power to reach over 1.2 billion kilowatts by 2030. At the same time, China is also making significant strides in renewable energy in overseas markets. In terms of technology, China also holds a leading position. Last year, the world's top 4 companies were all wind power equipment manufacturers from China. For the first time, all of them were Chinese companies. In the manufacturing and export markets for steel plates and electric vehicles, Chinese companies also hold significant market shares. The Guardian stated that when it comes to clean energy, competition is already meaningless. The director of the Center for Climate Policy at the Asia Society Policy Institute in the United States, Li Xi, said, "There's only one player here. The Americans aren't even in the room." He is fully convinced that this situation will continue, forming a stark contrast with China. The comparison is with the United States. Earlier this year, the United Nations had already confirmed that it had received the United States' formal notification of withdrawal from the Paris Agreement on climate change. The US State Department, up to July, further downsized. The Global Climate Change Office dismissed the last group of American climate change negotiators. This means that the United States has already lost its representation in international climate change negotiations. The representative position will be in Brazil this November. The third United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change will be held in Belém. At this conference, there will be no US representatives. Wei Wer believes that, from a historical perspective, countries that dominate energy usually also hold the reins of political and economic development. America's push in the new energy sector will cause more and more countries to turn to China. The conclusion is that Trump's vision is outdated and also short-sighted. China should thank him for giving up Africa and also for giving up the new